Sometimes, it only takes one fateful night for your entire world to shatter. I always thought family was my safest place, where my brother was a hero, someone who'd never betray me. Until the night I uncovered a horrific truth: the person I trusted most had inflicted an unhealable wound on the woman I loved. What began in the warmth of family gatherings and laughter spiraled into a nightmare behind closed doors. In a single moment, every shade of hope faded, replaced by pain, fury, and heartbreaking betrayal. Have you ever faced the impossible choice: preserve a broken family built on secrets, or fight for the truth, even if it means losing everyone you once called home? Before we dive in, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Enjoy the video. If you asked me years ago what defined home, I would have painted you a picture full of warmth: roasted turkey on Thanksgiving, cousins sprawled on the living room rug, the muted glow of Sunday morning cartoons. In my eyes, our family wasn't just ordinary, we were invincible. An immigrant family in a new country, forging bonds stronger than steel. My brother, Michael, was the backbone, older by 2 years, always a little braver, always the first to defend me against playground bullies or neighborhood taunts. He was my hero. My sister, Sarah, clever and sharp-tongued but fiercely loyal, kept even the darkest secrets safe behind her quiet smile. At the center, my mother, strict, traditional, but loving, and my father, a gentle giant hiding his dreams of a better life for us all. Those first years in America, every victory felt earned: the first time we could afford dinner out, the battered Honda that was both embarrassment and pride, the annual backyard barbecues where language barriers melted away with laughter. On those nights, as the grill sizzled and Uncle Joe slipped everyone extra drinks, I'd watch my brother telling stories, making even the smallest triumphs sound legendary. Friends, neighbors, even new faces from church, all found their place at our table. And then, there was Emily. She tumbled into my life with her radiant laugh and disarming honesty. The very first holiday I brought her home, she seemed to belong. My parents adored her curiosity about our culture, and my sister found in her the confidant she'd longed for. Even my brother, Michael, aloof with outsiders, welcomed her, teasing me about my "too serious" expression whenever Emily hugged me. For once, everything seemed right: my family expanding, future shimmering with possibility. But looking back, I realized there were moments, tiny, almost invisible, where the mask slipped. When Michael's joke stung a little too sharply. When he'd pull me aside, warning me that trust could be dangerous, in this world, in this country, even in our own blood. I brushed it off, like anyone craving peace. Family fights? We resolved them with awkward apologies and overcooked pasta. Wounds, if any, were hidden under smiles for the sake of unity. It was easy to believe in the illusion. Easy to pretend that love alone could shield us from every storm. Until the cracks began to show. Sarah started avoiding family dinners, saying she was busy. My father, once full of stories, became quieter, more withdrawn. My mother began criticizing Emily, soft at first, then so sharply that I sometimes caught Emily blinking back tears in the kitchen, her hands trembling over the sink. There was one night, during a particularly raucous party, when I found Michael staring out the window, away from the sound and light. When I nudged him, he just said, "Not everything's as simple as you think, little brother." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. But I didn't see it, not then. I chose trust over doubt, because believing in your family, even when it hurts, is what you're taught to do. What would you do if the foundation you built your life on was only an illusion? If every happy memory was shadowed by something you can't quite name? In the loud clamor of family togetherness, we often silence the quiet warnings, the awkward glances, the stories left unfinished, the moments of tension buried by laughter. Sometimes, those are the very signs that matter most. And so, my belief in the perfect family held strong, until that night everything broke. But the cracks in the illusion were growing. And in the brittle silence beneath the laughter, a first betrayal was waiting, one that would shatter everything I thought I knew. The night everything began to unravel wasn't marked by thunder or storms, it was quiet, almost deceptively so. We were at a family gathering, the kind that usually ends with laughter and everyone wrapped up in warm embraces. But that night, beneath the chatter and clinking glasses, something darker lingered, unspoken, waiting to surface. Emily's eyes were uneasy. I remember the way she held her cup tightly, knuckles white, as if trying to anchor herself to something real. For weeks after, she avoided looking at me directly, and when she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper that shattered my world. "I think Michael tried to kiss me that night." I sat frozen, the room spinning as the words echoed in my head. How could it be? Michael, the brother I idolized, who fought off bullies for me, who was like a second father at times, could do something like that? At first, I struggled to believe her, desperate to find another explanation. Maybe he was joking, she misread it, right? But then Emily's story spilled out, a fragile thread of truth. She told me how they found themselves alone on the rooftop, the wind cold but the atmosphere even colder. How he stared too long, and then suddenly leaned in to kiss her, drunk but deliberate. How she dodged, heart pounding with both fear and confusion. I confronted Michael later that night, shaking with a storm of anger and disbelief. He admitted it, a sloppy mistake, he said, too drunk to think straight, a moment he regretted. His apology was mechanized, rehearsed, and yet it hung heavy in the air, thick with tension I couldn't dissolve. But the family, our family, what should have been a reckoning became a chasm. My mother brushed it off as a drunken lapse, my father avoided the conversation, and my sister, Sarah, looked torn in silence. It was as if telling the truth would unravel the carefully patched fabric we all clung to. I felt myself drifting, torn between protecting the family name and standing by Emily, the one person who had trusted me with her pain. Every family gathering became a tightrope walk. Glances turned sideways toward me, whispered questions filled the spaces I wasn't allowed to answer. Emily grew distant too. There were nights she'd retreat into herself, and I watched helplessly as the warmth in her once bright eyes flickered and dimmed. The very relationship I thought was my anchor was turning into the hardest battle to fight. And then there was Sarah, my sister. She became a quiet ally, the only one who dared to probe beneath our family's fragile calm. She asked questions no one else wanted to hear and offered Emily a friend's shoulder when no one else would. Without her, I'm not sure where we would have been. But even as the tension simmered, I held on to hope that dialogue and honesty could heal the lingering fracture, that time would smooth the edges of pain. I wanted to believe that a mistake, as terrible as it was, could be forgiven. Yet, suspense lingered in the air like a storm about to break. Because the first betrayal wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of cracks that ran deeper than I had dared imagine, cracks that would threaten to shatter everything I held sacred. The illusion of family safety had begun to crumble. The shadows were growing darker, and the next storm would come roaring without warning. There are moments in life when everything you believed shatters in an instant, like glass crashing to the floor, impossible to glue back together. For me, that moment came on a night that began like any other family gathering, but ended in a nightmare that no one in my family could ever erase. The party was loud, full of music and laughter, the kind of scene where masks are easiest to wear. But beneath the noise, unease was simmering. I remember scanning the crowd, searching for Emily. Joy was supposed to fill the air, but instead I found a pit growing in my chest. Then, the worst sound I could imagine, strange noises from upstairs, muffled but fierce. I followed them to a door slightly ajar, and what I saw made my heart stop. Michael, my brother, my once hero, had pinned Emily against the bed, his hand covering her mouth, his other hand moving where no one should ever touch without consent. Her eyes screamed for help, his were wild with something I couldn't understand. Rage took over before reason could speak. I lunged at him, fury blazing in every punch. The fight was brutal, bloodied knuckles, a broken nose, shattered trust. Others burst in, pulling us apart, but the damage had been done, deeper than any wound on the skin. In that frenzied chaos, I saw my family fracture, the warm home I'd known cracked wide open. My mother, overwhelmed with denial, wept and begged me to forgive your brother, he made a mistake. Her voice was soft but shattered the last of my hope for understanding, as if she demanded I overlook what was unforgivable. My father remained silent, his stoic face unreadable, but the tension between them was a chasm I could feel collapse beneath my feet. Sarah, my sister, stayed by my side quietly. The only one who understood the darkness that had invaded our family. She held Emily's hand, whispering words of comfort, her own eyes heavy with unshed tears. Her calm was a fragile refuge amid the storm. Relatives and friends, once so warm and welcoming, now drifted, their eyes flicking nervously between us. Some whispered judgments, others averted their gaze. The community I thought was steady was suddenly a cold sea of uncertainty. What hurt the most wasn't just Michael's betrayal, it was the way those I loved struggled to face the truth. How my mother's desperate need for preservation turned into denial, and how silence became a weapon sharper than any words. That night marked a rupture, not just in our family, but inside me. Anger, confusion, grief tangled into a web I could not escape. Questions tore at my soul. How had I missed the signs? Was my blind trust the very thing that let this happen? Could love survive such darkness? But amid the wreckage, a part of me hardened. A resolve forming from the ashes. To protect Emily, to seek justice, to unravel the lies, even if it meant standing alone against my own blood. In every broken family, a choice surfaces, to bury wounds in silence or to confront the pain no matter the cost. And for us, that choice would soon bring more storms. Because what you don't see in that moment, the deeper shadows creeping behind closed doors, are secrets far darker than anyone could imagine. In the aftermath of that shattering night, silence was heavy, but inside, a storm raged. Emily and I were left alone with the shattered pieces of our lives, wrestling with a trauma that felt endless. The nights blurred into excruciating days, her tears falling like rain while I struggled to hold myself together, trembling not only for her, but for the family that was crumbling around us. Therapy became our fragile lifeline. The first session was a clutter of jagged emotions, anger, fear, guilt tangled in words barely spoken. Emily, usually so strong, broke down, and I found myself drowning in a sea of repressed pain I hadn't even admitted I carried. I realized I wasn't only mourning what happened to her, but also the brother I thought I knew, the protector who had become a predator. Our counselor gently pushed us to confront not just the event, but the hidden wounds underneath, trust shattered, safety stolen. The road was rocky. There were days Emily refused to get out of bed, haunted by nightmares and panic attacks, nights I lay awake, replaying every moment, every missed warning signal. But slowly, tentatively, healing started. The self-defense classes Emily took weren't just physical, they became a metaphor for reclaiming power stolen from her. Meanwhile, I wasn't content with silence any longer. There were whispers in the dark, rumors swirling about Michael's past, shadows cast long before what I had witnessed. I began to dig, a reluctant detective amidst family drama and secrecy. With Sarah's quiet support, we reached out to old friends, ex-colleagues, previous girlfriends, each story revealing cracks far wider than the one night. One woman spoke of unwanted touches and uncomfortable silences at company parties. Another recounted whispered warnings and a pattern of behavior dismissed too easily. It became clear Michael's darkness wasn't a single lapse, it was a pattern, one that had neither been acknowledged nor confronted by those who should have protected the vulnerable. Sarah, always the silent guardian, quietly held everything together at home, shielding Emily when relatives asked prying questions, managing calls from our parents who were caught between denial and guilt. Every new revelation deepened the family rupture, and yet also steeled my resolve. My lawyer friend cautioned me about the risks. Pursuing legal action could spiral into a nightmare with unexpected consequences, possibly even criminal charges against me for what happened physically that night. But justice was no longer optional, it was imperative. For Emily. For every woman whose voice had been silenced. Our circle grew stronger. Friends who once were just acquaintances turned into pillars of support, rallying around Emily and me. Together, we prepared, for court, for exposure, for the fight that awaited. But even as we planned our battle, the scars ran deep and healing felt fragile. The trauma didn't end with the investigation, it followed us, lurking in shadows and quiet moments. And through it all, the question echoed relentlessly inside me: how much of my family's silence was complicity? How many lives did the illusion protect, and how many did it destroy? In confronting the darkness buried beneath layers of love and lies, sometimes the hardest battle is trusting again, trusting in yourself, in truth, and in the people who choose to stand by you. Our fight was just beginning. The courtroom was looming, the family divide widening, and the truth more explosive than I ever imagined. The courtroom was a stage upon which everything I had feared and fought for converged. Sitting there, holding Emily's trembling hand, I was painfully aware that this was more than a trial, it was a reckoning. Not just for Michael, but for every secret kept, every silence broken, and every shattered trust in my fractured family. The evidence we had painstakingly gathered was overwhelming. 8 women, including Emily, had come forward, their voices, raw and unwavering, breaking the heavy silence that had lingered too long. Their testimonies painted not just a picture of one man's darkness, but a web of betrayal that had infiltrated our lives deeply. But the most painful moments were not the accusations, but the moments when I caught my father's haunted eyes across the courtroom, silent, burdened with guilt and regret, and my mother's stone-cold refusal to accept the truth. She sat rigid, clinging to denial like a lifeline, her whispered pleas outside the courtroom echoing her unwillingness to confront what her son had done. I saw Sarah there too, steadfast and brave, lending testimony quietly but powerfully. Her presence was a balm to me and Emily, a reminder that family could sometimes mean choosing sides, even when the ties were blood-deep and painful. The trial pushed us all to the edges of endurance. There were moments when Emily's composed testimony cracked, tears flowing as she recalled the weight of fear she carried alone. I found myself wrestling with waves of anger and sorrow, wishing I could erase the past but knowing that justice meant facing it head-on. Michael's defense tried to twist the story, to turn accusation into denial, but the truth was unyielding. The judge's verdict, guilty on all counts, was the moment a heavy burden lifted, though scars remained deep beneath the surface. Yet, justice came with a steep price. Our family was irreparably fractured. Some relatives withdrew, others severed ties entirely. My parents' divide grew wider, with my father slowly beginning to face the reality while my mother retreated further into denial. It felt like losing 2 worlds at once, the family I had known, and the family I thought I could rebuild. But amid the wreckage, Emily and I found a sliver of hope. We chose each other, not as victims, but as survivors ready to heal. We moved to a new city, far from the shadows that haunted our past but close enough to hold on to the few family members who stood with us. Sarah became our anchor, visiting often and proving that loyalty could survive even the darkest storms. Our wedding was small, intimate, surrounded by those who truly believed in the power of love and resilience. The ceremony was quieter, but every vow we spoke carried the weight of our journey, struggles endured, healing begun, futures reclaimed. Still, the path ahead wasn't simple. At times, grief gnawed silently, and memories surged without warning. But we found strength in therapy, in community, in each other. Together, we began to weave new dreams, dreams that included safety, trust, and possibly, one day, children raised without secrets or fear. Justice wasn't just about a verdict, it was about reclaiming our lives, choosing how to grow beyond trauma and betrayal, and daring to build something new from the ruins. Yet, the hardest battles are often those after the gavel falls, the daily work of healing, rebuilding trust, and transforming pain into purpose. Healing isn't a moment, it's a journey. Our story didn't end with a courtroom verdict or a new life in a different city. In the quiet aftermath, after the headlines faded, the real work began, learning how to live again, picking up the pieces, and daring to create meaning from all the heartbreak. There were days when Emily and I felt like ghosts in our own bodies. Memories would ambush us, her startled wake-ups in the middle of the night, my reflexive flinch at raised voices, even in the safe embrace of our new home. There was anger for what we lost. Sorrow for what we would never get back. But slowly, bit by bit, hope seeped in through the cracks. Sarah, ever our silent warrior, encouraged us to attend a local support group. There, we found women and men who had survived their own nightmares, people who spoke our language of grief and courage. Emily listened for weeks, fearful at first, then spoke with a trembling voice that grew steadier each week. She was no longer just surviving, she was redefining herself, story by story. I, too, began to share. The shame, the guilt of not seeing the truth sooner, the confusion of loving someone who had hurt us so deeply. In that space, surrounded by others choosing to heal, I found forgiveness for myself. Little by little, we were learning to imagine futures unburdened by the past. Then came an unexpected invitation. A former survivor, now an advocate, reached out, asking if Emily would speak at a local college. I watched her rehearse by our window that evening, her notes shaking in her hand, her voice breaking at the hardest parts, but never once giving up. On stage, she shared not just her pain, but her strength. She talked about warning signs, the importance of listening, of believing. That day, the applause was thunderous, but what mattered most were the quiet hugs from students afterward, the ones who whispered, "Thank you, you spoke for me." We resolved to turn our pain into purpose. Together, we started volunteering at a crisis center. Sarah joined us, and even my father, slowly searching for redemption, attended workshops for families of abuse survivors. Sometimes, we'd sit and make coffee for people too nervous to speak, other times we'd mentor, or simply listen. Every story we heard was a reminder, we were not alone, and our scars could light the way for others. Even in our private lives, new beginnings blossomed, weekends with our niece, the innocence in her laughter a precious reminder of what we now fiercely protect. Talks about building our own family, of raising children in honesty, love, not fear. But advocacy wasn't always easy. It reawakened triggers, forced us to relive our trauma. There were still rifts. My mother's messages of blame, relatives who refused to accept the truth. There were holidays spent apart, awkward run-ins at community gatherings, awkward conversations and difficult boundaries we had to enforce for our own safety. The pain lingered, but it no longer controlled us. Because through advocacy, we found resilience. And through resilience, purpose. Emily's journey from victim to survivor to advocate inspired many, but no one more than me. Each small victory, every life touched, knowledge shared, voice heard, became part of our healing, part of honoring what we had endured. If there's one thing our story taught me, it's this: you can't undo the darkness, but you can refuse to be defined by it. From pain, you can rise. From betrayal, you can rebuild. And when you use your scars to light the way for others, you become more than a survivor, you become hope. As the sun sets on this chapter, our family is smaller, but our love is truer. We are committed. Not just to each other, but to the next frightened person, the next family in turmoil, the next soul searching for light in the darkest night. And this is our promise: no one needs to walk that road alone. Because the end of one battle is always the beginning of another journey, and sometimes, those who endure the most become the most powerful voices for change. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video all the way through. Your support means the world to us and motivates the channel to keep improving and growing. If you found this story meaningful, please hit the like button and share it with your friends and family to help spread this important message. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our upcoming content. Most importantly, please leave a comment below to share your thoughts, feelings, or suggestions on how we can make the channel even better. Your feedback is truly valuable to us. Again, thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.